So how's everybody this afternoon now, isn't it? What's going on? I'm just going to open it up to questions, because then we have more time, we get to everybody, and I don't really have a set format, so it's all up to you guys. That's it.
For someone who's trying to make their demo tape voice acting, what would be a good, do you want to keep consistent with your natural voice, or do you want to have a plethora of different characters you feel strong you can be able to do?
Depends on what kind of demo you're talking about.
Character demo.
Range is definitely good.
Yep.
Range is important.
Yep.
But you don't want to attempt characters that you can't sustain with your natural voice. Mm-hmm. I've sounded like this for probably more than half my life. So yeah, considerably more. So there's things that I would certainly attempt. It's good to push yourself. What you have to do is kind of figure out the spectrum of where your voice lives. And hone characters certainly, but I'm never going to get hired to play a 5-year-old girl, probably. And that's all right. There's so many other people who do it so much better. And also, it would put an enormous amount of strain on my voice. I'd say before you get concerned with how many different characters you can do, find out how well you can do them. Even if you only have 5 or 6 really strong characters, that's better than 13 or 14 okay ones. That the performance is really the thing that will stand out first. I mean, there are a lot of people who sound alike, and yet there's some people who get hired again and again and again, even though they may not do very many voices altogether because of just how good they are.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
You said that Final Fantasy took you 8 months to produce. Over the span of that time, how was it compared to other jobs as far as the studio going in? Was it the same old, or was there something different working with something like Square Enix?
Well, no job is really same old for me. I have to admit, certainly I like working on video games and animation a lot more than some regional radio commercials. Because some of them you're in and out in 10 minutes and that's it, and you might never hear that spot again. For me, this will always be a landmark, for so many reasons. It's the longest job I've ever had. It's the most interesting job. It's my favorite character. It's really the one that sort of put me on the map. So it never got routine for me. I'm not really sure if that's what you mean.
I guess, it kind of made it a little bit more special with that big of a project.
Yeah, I mean, it was nice to know that I had so many sessions ahead of me, too. A lot of people will tell you, so what's your favorite job? Yes, my favorite job, but also my favorite job is my next job. Because no matter how much you want, you're always wondering, like, okay, what's coming after that? But, I mean, not that I'm certainly not wonderfully grateful to be there. And also because I got to know my director and producer really well, and they're great people. If you have a good rapport with those people and the engineer, just FYI, make friends with the engineer, because they control everything. So it was a great experience. It was like having, well, I don't want to say a second home, but it was nice to know that we started recording in May of that year and didn't finish till probably November, and we did pickups then. It was like something to look forward to every day. And I haven't worked on a ton of projects like that. I'm working on something now where I've had about 3 sessions, and it's so much fun. Not just because the project is super, super awesome, but I love working with the director. And that is something that you really value as a performer. Someone who trusts you, who doesn't micromanage. It's really important to have a good relationship with your director, because some people, they'll just say, can you do that differently? It's like, well, that doesn't help me at all. But when a director actually, he paints a very clear picture for you, but also trusts your choices. I've been micromanaged on some rinky-dink little commercial with, I don't know, probably 10 people putting their opinions in, and nobody was in the room. They're all, patched in from somebody's in Chicago, somebody's in Delaware, somebody's in St. Louis, and they're all like, I don't like the way she said the word then. Can we do that again? and we'll spend 20 minutes on one sentence. And it's just a waste of time. But, you know, it's your job to be like, you know what, I'm here to make you happy, I'm here to do what you want. But it's amazing. On the biggest and most complicated and most performance-driven things, we've always just trusted each other, and usually we, you know, get it done in 3 takes at the most, and then you move on. So that's always lovely.
What kind of direction were you given to when you were voicing Fang?
What do you mean? Simon?
Like how did you approach the role?
Well, it was, I think a lot of it was just one of those, if you'll pardon the expression, just, you know, lightning struck. I got very lucky, but they were looking specifically for a deeper voiced woman with a little bit of, you know, a little bit of husk to her voice. So I think it was just something in the way I read the accent. But I was given a pretty thorough rundown of the story before we even started. You know, the director sat down with me and kind of gave me the bullet points of the story and what my role in it was, and how that, you know, Fang was supposed to be this sort of mysterious person who you weren't sure what side she was working for. And then, you know, she has her whole backstory with Neil. So we approached it from, you know, I never liked the expression, you're like, tough girl with a heart of gold. But it is sort of like that. But as the story moves forward, you know, more and more of her is revealed. So I didn't want to, or I should say we did not want to make her one-dimensional. You know, that's what I really like about games now, is that these characters have become so much more human and relatable. You know, it isn't just like Mario going ding, 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 you know, throwing fireballs and kicking mushrooms, which, don't get me wrong, love it. But we approached it from, she is tough. She's not pretending to be tough, but there's a reason that she does everything. And it's because of family and honor and loyalty and friendship. And we really approached it from that sort of emotional standpoint. She was very, very strong in her choices. So, and I got very attached as the game went on. It was hard. It was hard to leave her. It was sort of like, you know, she's this awesome creature, and I'm, you know, just me. But I was like, let's meet in the middle somewhere, you know. As soon as I learned how to jump off of a spaceship and land on my feet, you know, thousands of feet down, then I feel like, okay, I will have achieved that.
Do you have any weird moments in conventions, like any weird stories?
Well, okay, I've got a story. I mean, it's not really that weird, but it's about dialects, actually, and people's perception of how everybody from around the world should sound. And, you know, one thing I learned, I don't know if you guys know of a voice actor named Zach Hanks. Okay, well, he's great. He's a wonderful teacher. I took a class from him last year, and he's amazing. And he was talking about the difference between true, authentic dialects and the standard referential dialects that we're used to. He said, you know, what do you guys think of when you think of German? Usually, you know, Raiders of the Lost Ark. What do you think of when you think of Scottish? Groundskeeper Willie. Maybe Craig Ferguson. So there's, and because these games are marketed to, well, yes, around the world, but if they come out first, a lot of them, of course, in Japan, but in America. So they want the accents to be very distinctively recognizable. And I was in Australia last year, and I was talking to the conch chair outside, and some wayward fellows came up and asked us for some money, and I said, I'm sorry, I don't have any. And he stared at me and went, you sound like Judge Judy. And I said, no, I don't. And he's like, yeah, you do. I was like, I don't, but thank you. And I thought, where the hell did he get Judge Judy from? And I thought, it's so interesting to me what an American accent is supposed to sound like. Because, you know, if you think about it, the United States could probably be divided into about 25 more countries if we're talking about regional dialect. So that was pretty interesting to me. You know, for the most part, my experiences at cons have been really great. I haven't had, you know, too many issues. Occasionally, there's some boundary problems that I think you were here yesterday, and someone came up to me at a signing and began to cry. And, and I just didn't know how to react to that. I was like, I want to hug you. I don't know if that's going to make it worse. But I think it was just, it's very interesting. But no, for the most part, they've all, I mean, cons are such fascinating universes to me. I mean, the cosplay is incredible. You guys, I'm so impressed with what you guys do and how much time and effort you put in. I'm not so totally crafty, and I'm also lazy. And you guys do it so much better. But I love coming to cons, but I don't sleep much. So
when you're recording a game like Final Fantasy 13,
Mhm.
you have quite a bit of dialogue that
I'm not going to be a jerk. I'm going to stand up. Sorry. I'm so tired. Okay, go ahead.
So a lot of the dialogue will be for cutscenes where you're
Mhm.
matching lip movements to a character's
Yeah.
mouth. And then you'll have other dialogue like battle cries where that's not an issue. Are things like that recorded differently? Are they approached differently?
Well, they're all recorded eventually. A lot of times, and that's a great question, by the way. Thank you for asking. Reacts, noises, and efforts and are usually recorded as pickups at the end. We recorded almost all the battle cries and pickups at the end of that, at the end of the year. Sorry, wow. It just went away for a second. A lot of the visuals were already dubbed in Japanese before I started. So I had that as reference for tone and for physicality, which is great. Because, you know, people forget, you're not just standing in a booth talking like this, especially when you're in a fighting game or a fantasy game or any game that requires you to move. You kind of have to, you know, I would sort of feign throwing a spear or jumping. Obviously, you can't, you know, run in place or whatever, but it was, what's that?
I've not done that.
Oh.
In place and I could hear it on the microphone.
Oh yeah, the microphones can hear somebody sneezing like 4 counties away. They're super sensitive. So you have to be careful about that stuff. But it is very important to be visible. So especially with the reacts noises and the part that they make a sound for everything. They look over their shoulder, they go, huh? You know, they catch an name, oh! I mean, we don't do that in real life, but I mean, everything apparently has to have a sound effect. So that's probably half of what I do when I'm dubbing anything. But the battle cries were really fun, and of course, you know, when she defeats someone, you know, didn't even break a sweat. Eat this, I think, which was one of the fabulous ones. And they would always let me save my screams for the end of the session. Because guys, oh my God, 4 hours of screaming, like on a military game, you're done. So they were always very, very kind about that. But I mean, that's a great question because it's a very different kind of performance too. And sometimes my voice will come like, ah! I'm like, okay, can we do that one again? Or use it for, you know, the gag reel. But I love acting for video games because the performances, I mean, you've seen them, you know, they're all very human, they're so subtle, they're so nuanced. It's not just, you know, scream, whisper, cry, you know, talk normal. I've seen some really, really bad video games recently and they're from like 10, 15 years ago. I can't believe you came over here. What are you doing? Like, who allowed that? You know, I mean, there's probably a reason why there didn't used to be any voice acting in video games. And I so appreciate that it gives an actor a platform for that kind of performance. And, you know, it's all becoming so merged with motion capture and facial capture, and pretty soon they might not even, you know, need to put those together, just all be the same thing.
When Final Fantasy, after you Final Fantasy 13, when Final Fantasy 13 2 was announced, were you disappointed that Fang only had maybe a total of...
God, yes. Oh, God. If you become a voice actor, be prepared for a lot of waiting and a lot of downtime for announcements. It's very rare. I mean, except for, like, you know, the uppermost echelon of the people who know and work all the time. I remember my agent saying, "Yeah, you're definitely coming back," and then about 3 months later, I was like, "Hello, any word on that?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, they had to push it. They don't know when it's going to be." And I swear that it was like another 6 months before I heard anything. I was like, "My God!" Then I finally went in, and they said, "We're sorry." I said, "Why?" "Because this is your only session." And we didn't even need the full 4 hours, I don't think. Yeah, it was about 90 seconds. I was disappointed, but yet at the same time, I was very grateful that they got to come back at all. Because you know, number one, it's work, but number two, I'd always said, you know, people say, would you play her again? I said I'd play her as many times as they would ask me to, until people got sick of her, which I hope doesn't happen. But yeah, I mean, it was cool. It was cool to do that, and to know that whatever it was they did was also very, very important in driving the story forward towards the end.
What was your experience like recording for Helsing Ultimate?
It was amazing. Everything about it was amazing. Is there anything specific you want to know about?
Mainly the Zoran versus Zer's sequence.
Oh, that epic battle. Here's what I knew, is that when I booked it, some people who, you know, dear friends of mine who are huge anime fans and know a lot about that universe, they said, I don't know if you have any idea, like, what a big deal this is. And I said, no, I do. They said, no, you don't. This is a really big deal. And I had a friend of mine who loves the show. She kind of guided me through it. She gave me the whole backstory. So this is very, very helpful. That was a pretty epic battle, and it ended really badly for me. Deservedly so. Because, yeah, I did horrible things for no good reason. Did you want to know about what the recording process was like, or just emotionally? Or just on?
Yeah, just what you went through.
Well, I mean, getting into such an insanely evil character was kind of interesting. I mean, obviously, I'm not a Nazi, and I'm pretty sure I'm not a vampire. I think. But there's, you know, you always do. You put a little bit of yourself into every performance. You have to be able to relate to it in some way. It isn't just like, okay, you put on a blinder and, you know, it's somebody else's brain. My director, Taliesin Jaffe, who is also a dear friend, is marvelous. He is an actor himself. He was a child actor. I don't know if you guys ever saw Mr. Mom, but he, oh, okay. I'm dating myself. Did you ever see 2010? He's in that. He was on Amazing Stories. Anyway, he's been working for many, many years, and he's a really, really talented and intuitive director and paints great pictures. And was able to really, really get the best out of me as far as, you know, when she's got her hand over my mouth. You know, there's actually many different ways to have someone's hand over your mouth and not make it sound ridiculous. I didn't know this. You know, when I'm being ground against the wall, I had to do very specific gurgling noises. You know, not like, and he was like, no, you're not being waterboarded. You're being dragged along the wall. Oh, okay. So that was extremely helpful. It was a, you know, he can paint a really clear picture, and I am an audiovisual thinker. I'm not a math person, so that's, you know, for years I was a fine artist. I still am. I took 10 years of classical piano. It's just everything is sort of sensory for me. So that was extremely helpful. Had everything in high school been delivered to me in some kind of audiovisual form, rather than having to memorize and write, I probably would have been a straight A student. But I think that's why this works well for me. It's a language that I speak.
Have you worked on a lot of games that don't need to be localized but were produced for an English-speaking audience first?
Yes. Yes, I can answer that, yes. There's a couple that, oh boy, talk about a long time between sessions. There's one that I worked on last September, and I'm going back in, you know, maybe another 2 weeks or so. That has to be localized, and another one that I just worked on, which also has to be localized. But everything else that I worked on or I'm continuing to work on will be, well, no, I'd say half. I can't make up my mind. Okay, now.
Yes, how attached do you get to projects in the end? Do you invest a lot of time watching after you've done it to see like how you did or what you were part of, or is it sometimes more of a job?
That's a really good question, and actually sometimes I do, because I look at a lot, well, I listened to a lot of the stuff that I did when I was first starting out. Some of it was just god-awful. And I thought, I cannot believe they hired me. On the other hand, you know, not everybody who produces things is all that professional. There are people who, they just want to get it done. I think I've come a really, really long way. obviously when I make these reels, I have to go back and kind of watch painstakingly just to get, whatever scenes I want. I mean, I will listen to something that I did 4 years ago and be like, that really should have been different. I don't know why they let that pass. Like, it doesn't matter, it's done, they liked it. There's not, the stuff that I've been doing over the last few years, especially now, I think I'm more attached to just because it's stuff that I'm really excited to be a part of. And again, always happy to work. But some of the stuff that I've been working on lately is super, super exciting to me, and there's like no greater feeling than booking something you were really gunning for. And one of the hardest parts about auditioning is letting it go when you're done, because you can't obsess, you can't think about it too much, you just gotta do your best and move on, and then when you get the call, you're like, oh my God, it worked. Okay, I have to remember what I did. But, there's no formula. But I try not to attach to too many things that I read for. I get probably more attached, or I used to get more attached before I book than after. If I book something, I'm like, that's great. I mean, there's some stuff I like more than others. One thing that I still kind of like grumble about is I read about 12 roles for Skyrim, and I didn't get it. And the one role the extra role I could have read for, and I was like, oh, I just don't have time, and I've already done 12, and a good friend of mine booked it. So I was like, that's awesome. And I was like, but what if I had? So,
What role is it?
Common woman.
Common woman?
Yeah. Hey, just to be part of that game. But at the same time, yeah, there's, and nobody asked this, but I'm just going to include it anyway. I have been really wanting roles in the Marvel universe for a long time, I'll take any of the superheroines, or even some of the weirdo villains. I would take Batgirl, Catwoman. I would take Wonder Woman. Hell yeah, I'd take Wonder Woman. Emma Frost. Jean Grey, Rogue, and I've read for all those roles in different variations, so it's just a matter of time. Yes?
You mentioned games from 10, 15 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Do you game yourself?
I do sometimes. I really enjoy playing them, and I don't have a console at home because it would eat my life. I did spend a lot of time playing. I had that little Nintendo Game Boy, and it used to get taken away from me routinely. I got very good at that little Donkey Kong. Yes, no, I don't have a console at home. I like to, but almost every single one of my friends, especially the voice actor friends, they have one, so I know if I ever really want to play BioShock Infinite, or The Last of Us, or Skyrim, which I still haven't played, I will have a chance to. They're amazing. Those games are totally amazing. But I grew up playing Donkey Kong, Centipede, Frogger, Galaga, Tron. So, and yeah, hours and hours, just zombieing out. So I try to limit myself. Otherwise, 3 days will go by, and I won't remember my name. So, yes.
Do you have your own recording equipment at your own home, or do you go to a regular studio whenever you get called for roles?
I recorded 95% of my auditions from home for about 7 years. And I do still have I actually need to replace it, but it's now at the point where if you don't have your own home set up, you're kind of a little behind. I prefer to, no, it's not crucial. The agency I'm with now, I prefer to go in, and that's an option. My other agency really only let you come in if you desperately needed to. I like having the human interaction. I like having direction. I like being able to give a couple reads and know that whatever they told me to do was not the exact same thing that everybody else did. Because when you're at home auditioning, you are working in a vacuum. You have to be good at self-directing no matter what. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, it's very easy to overthink it. And sometimes I would do 10, 11, 12 takes and think, well, shit, now I have to start over, or just pick one. It's nice because you go in, you read it, they might say do it again, and then you're done. So it's kind of a relief. But virtually everybody I know now has a setup at home because there's times when you will need to. And I do a fair amount of my own recording just for independent stuff at home too. And I will occasionally do sessions for something like Clear Channel. And because they're in Atlanta, and I can't go to Atlanta, and they're not going to pay, you know, $1,000 for a studio rental or whatever. They will literally just call me on the phone, and I will record it, and they will sweeten it on their end. So there's all kinds of ways to do it. No, it's not.
What's it like voice acting in
Huh?
What's it like to voice act in different accents?
After a while, it's hard to stop. I'm happy and proud to say that I fooled a lot of Americans and Australians. A lot of people thought I was Claudia Black before it was officially announced, and that was a huge compliment to me. After a while, it's, you know, it's kind of like, it's not really thinking in another language, but yeah, thinking in a different dialect, it stretches your brain a little bit. And I've been fortunate that Australian came more easily to me than a lot of other dialects. I struggle with French, like mightily struggle with it, but you know, other ones are just, I have a better ear for it. So that one, I was a little more fortunate. And yeah, when you're doing it for about 6 months, you do sometimes take your work home with you. So yeah, but it wasn't bad. I mean, if I have to read in another language, I'm thinking, okay, your dialect has to be really, really good. I actually auditioned for something in German, and I thought, okay, I can do the German dialect. However, I was actually reading German. So you want to be at the point where you're so good at the dialect, you don't even have to think about the words. You know, that's something you want to be able to, you know, because I would have to stop and I'd make sure the pronunciation was correct, and German is difficult. That is not an easy one, and it's very easy to make it sound absolutely ridiculous if you're not careful. Because again, there's that whole cliche, but you know, I was trying to make it recognizable and yet at the same time not goofy, you know, because there's always the danger of doing that. It's why I don't audition for anything with a Scandinavian accent, because everything sounds like this, and I can't. So I'll do it if, you know, if there's a metaphorical gun to my head, but it's not something that I would opt for. Yes?
A follow-up to what she was saying about getting into dialects. Do you use certain like phrases and words to get into character? Because I do that when I do one of my characters, an English character.
Mm-hmm.
I always say the line, "Bubsy, you bumbling idiot," and it gets me right into the character if I have to.
You know, whatever helps. I don't really have that method. I think, you know, every language has their idioms, their expressions. I think that's smart to use whatever tools kind of get you into character. I might watch a clip of a favorite movie. I might think of, you know, when I was doing Irish, I watched a clip from In the Name of the Father. There's certain things that immediately come to mind. And dialects, as you know, are very, very specific. It's not just, you know, do a British accent. Well, what region are you talking about? Do an Irish accent. What county are you talking about? You know, do a Southern accent. Texas, Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, what? So there's a great resource online called the International Dialects of English Archive. They all read pretty much 2 or 3 passages, so it gets terribly boring when you hear it again and again. And I think the reason they use those is because they use every sound that the English language could make. But it's been very, very helpful for me. And other times I may not need a reference, you know. I might think of something like, oh, I know exactly what I'm going to do for that. But yeah, I think having some kind of a trick, it's sort of like how I used to have to memorize things for a science test. How I remember, you know, like kings play croquet on 5 grassy spots, you know, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species, and that's the only way I was able to memorize it. So yeah, whatever tools work. And I can't believe I still remember that.
You were mentioning before about Scandinavian accents. I recently interviewed a voice actress from Sweden, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And you had been mentioning before about the duality of how people really sound and how the large market that they sell games, etc., to think that people sound.
Sure.
Has that ever come up? Have you ever been approached by like someone from, say, Australia?
Mm-hmm.
That's not how I sound. Has that ever been an issue?
Oh goodness, you know, I don't recommend this, but sometimes I read some of the boards on Final Fantasy 13, and it's a great way to either, you know, make your day fantastic or ruin it. And truthfully, I can't or don't really let that stuff bother me because trolls will be trolls and hate has gotta hate. And the internet provides the veil of anonymity. So people will say things that they wouldn't dare say to you in person. The worst I saw was she sounds like Steve Irwin, or she sounds like Paul Hogan. I'm like, what other Australian have you ever heard? That's your only frame of reference. And I had somebody come to my fan page actually and basically tell me how much I sucked. And I was like, that's not how that works. I mean, you're certainly entitled to your opinion, but why come to my page just to poop on me, He's like, I'm from Australia and that was terrible. Or why did you do Fang in an Australian accent? And I'm like, well, okay, you don't know how this works. I didn't choose that. And I didn't just go in and improvise, 6 months worth of dialogue. And the best I could say is, well, again, you're entitled to your opinion, but the fans and the director and the writer and the developer and, most of the world at large seemed okay with it. So, I apologize. I'll do better next time. It's, most of the comments I got were very complimentary. And a lot of people swore up and down that I was Australian. In fact, and Georgia Van Kylenberg, who is a dear, dear person, she plays Vanille. She is from Melbourne. And, but she's been in the States quite a while. So sometimes her accent would fade in and out a little bit. And has become, more or less Californiized or Americanized or whatever. So some people thought that she was the American and I was the Australian, which is a huge compliment to me. But I think a lot of them were genuinely surprised to know that I wasn't. And I thought, well, God, that means I'm doing my job. So.
Yeah. Fang, so far, seems to be your biggest piece so far. You've got a lot of other ones that are really big, but it seems to be one of the hallmarks at this point. And you mentioned before how you look back 4 years later and you're like, God, is that what I sound like? Do you think this will be one of the ones where you'll be critical about it, or do you think even the artists go through that creative phase where they love what they're doing when they create it, but after they make it, they're done with it? Or is this going to be the ones where you can still, 4 years now, be proud of it?
I think I will always be proud of it. Obviously, if I allow myself to go over every nitpicky detail, of course there's some clips where I thought, oh, that's just sounded way too American. You too, huh? And huh is not a real Australian expression or a way of asking the question, so that always kind of bothered me. I was like, oh God, I just went totally California there. But no, I think I will always be proud of this. And that stands testament also to the way I was directed too. A lot of people mistakenly think that we just go in there and say whatever we want, which is really not the case. And I'm not gonna lie, not every piece of dialogue was brilliant. Some of the writing was just like, oh, don't make me say that. But you go in and you do the best you can. And some of it we were able to change at least to make it sound like something these people would actually say. I will always be proud of this. Do I think it's perfect? No. And there really is no such thing. But I think this will, for me, it was like something finally broke, and that I've been working for so long and so long and so long. And you can never, ever walk into an audition or a session being entitled. It is the kiss of death. And you will reek of it, and people will remember that.
That's for every job.
Huh?
That's for every job, though.
For every job. But a lot of, voiceover stuff too. It's lovely to get to a point where you feel like you don't have to work as hard to get these things, which is, for me, I'm always happy and proud. I never make any assumptions. I don't sit there and look at my phone and be like, why don't I have the next 3 weeks full? I'm grateful for all of it, but, to walk in and have it, expect everybody to sort of bow to you and act like, ugh, why am I here and how long is this going to take? Which I've seen some people do. Not going to name names, but it's kind of, are you kidding me? If this is such a burden, bye, I will take that job. So, it's, sorry, what was the question?
I was kind of just following you along, so I think I got a little bit lost in the week there too.
I have a tendency to ramble sometimes.
If it was like if you'd regret the afterwards.
No.
That's what it was. Or no,
No,
sorry,
no.
be picky about it afterwards and that's something obvious.
I don't think I have. There's probably a couple projects that I could easily have skipped because, and that's absolutely nothing in the video game or animation world at all. I mean, I would say only maybe a couple of regional commercials that I literally had to chase somebody down for 90 days for $100. I don't recommend that. It's just not worth it. I could actually, you know, go to Starbucks and work for a weekend and do much better.
How did you get into voice acting? Was it what you wanted to do when you were a kid?
Yes. I mean, it wasn't so clear in my mind as a kid. You know, like I said, I was an artist, and I painted, I drew, I drew on everything, and I still have all my art materials, and it's kind of shameful because I should still be doing that. But once I made up my mind that it was, you know, I was a mimic, and I wasn't trying to be, and you know, I grew up watching Hanna-Barbera and Looney Tunes and Tex Avery, you know, like Jabberjaw and Lippy the Lion and all that stuff. I'm really old. So I remember when my dad said to me, you could actually do this for a living. And it kind of stuck in my mind as, oh, that's sort of this nebulous possibility one day. I wish I had started it then. And it doesn't matter now anyway, but once I actually, it just kind of kept coming up again and again and again. And after college, I wasn't quite ready to be home. And I lived in Colorado for a while, came home for a summer and took a sort of all-purpose voiceover class with a wonderful teacher named Dolores Steele. And I don't even know where she is anymore, but I thought, oh, this is it. Like, I want to pursue this for real. So when I moved back to California about 13 years ago, I just dove in. I did all my research and I talked to friends and they recommended classes for me and I just started doing it that way. I mean, I kind of went in pretty standard, if you will. Everybody has a different pathway, and some people who are wildly successful were doing something else. They were doing theater, they were doing on-camera or whatever, and somebody was like, hey, you feel like reading it? And that's how it happened for them. For me, once I made up my mind, I mean, it was always a desire. I could take or leave on camera. I have a good time doing it, but I don't have anywhere near the same passion for it. So that's why I ended up following it. Yes.
My last question to you is, in a lot of the lessons and voiceover practice that I've done so far, a phrase always comes up constantly. The same thing, but different when doing auditions and casting and voice work. Now, how would you take this, and have you heard this phrase before?
Same but different?
Same thing, but different.
I'm not really sure what that's in reference to. Is that, you mean the way you read something?
The way you read, the way you cast, the way you speak, the way you present a character in auditions and screenplay and work. That's something that's come up a lot in my classes, and in
what context is your teacher saying that? Just so I can understand.
I believe he's saying it in the context of when you're doing your voice work and auditions in the studio and you're working with the director. Maybe the director's looking for something brilliant, but he wants the same thing, but different. And I'm trying to understand that myself.
That's a really good question, and I don't know that I've ever heard it phrased that way. I could take it to mean two things.
Go ahead. Whatever you're...
Thank you. One, it could mean you're following the specs, you're following the directions, you're following what the writer has asked for, but with your own spin on it. Or he could mean read it the same in a voice that is undeniably you, has kind of a signature, but put some kind of different variation on it. There's different ways to read a scene emotionally, or a line emotionally, and put the emphasis on. You can, what are you doing here? Or, what are you doing here? What are you doing here? I mean, that's like the simplest, tritest example I could come up with.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what he's saying. I don't know that I've ever heard it phrased that way. But I mean, it is interesting. I can't imagine it applies as much to character development as it does to, let's say, a commercial announcer read.
Fair enough.
But that's just the way I see it. I mean, I could be being completely dense right now and not even getting that, but that's what it feels like.
Perhaps I may have misphrased that a little bit.
No, I think you got it right. I just think you probably say it's better to ask them to articulate because they're being vague in what they want.
That is really vague. Just like if a director is not satisfied with what I'm saying, I need guidance, you know. I mean, some people just, you know, they nail it. Here's what, when you're reading for a commercial, you're reading for a promo, even sometimes when you're reading for an animated character, half the time they have no idea what they're looking for. They have a very general sense. They draw this ballpark, and they're like, you know, I've gotten commercial specs that were like, we want someone motherly but youthful, and we want someone who sounds, you know, relaxed but not sleepy. We want somebody who'd be enthusiastic but not angry. I mean, and everything is a contradiction. Like, so basically, you are just casting the widest net possible, and you have no idea what you want, but you're making us crazy trying to give you everything you're asking for and nothing that you want.
That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Yeah, it's just,
And if you try to analyze it that much, you'll go bananas. And at that point, just generally follow the directions. But, you know, maybe put your own spin on it. Sometimes I book things doing the weirdest stuff ever. Because you have to separate yourself somehow. And they're not going to tell you what everybody else did. They're not. So a lot of it is just guesswork. But I booked a role based on just extra sounds that I made, punctuating the lines instead of, you know, because these are what they call, you know, it's pre-life and post-life. Because when I'm standing in the voice, sometimes I'm going, or, right. You know, if you add stuff like that, you know, maybe that's what they meant by same but different. But that's bizarre. And if I may say so, not the greatest way to phrase it. Because it's just confusing.
That's why I thought of that, because I'm still trying to figure out.
I'm confused, you know, and I like to think I'm a pretty smart girl, but I would, you know, and there are no dumb questions at that point. Say, can you be a little more specific about what, you know, because nothing bothers me more when you're like, okay, do it again, but a little bit different, or, you know, a little, just, you know, a little slower. Okay, now split the difference. So, yeah.
thank you. I actually have one more.
Okay.
Kind of what I've noticed doing the GR stuff. A lot of the voice actors like to
Get a little exercise up here.
Yes. A lot of the voice actors like to get to know each other. They go out and have fun. Is that mostly because you're kind of all at the same place you are in life, and it's just nice to meet other people that you can talk to and share experiences? Is there a professional aspect to it, or just networking works really well and you get two roles? Or?
I never really look at it as an you know, as the, I never look at the point of it as I'm going to get more work out of this. I usually, I mean, it's funny because I have actually, based on that. It's not like you're going to a mixer or some specific networking event. Why I like it is because I get to know my fellow voice actors or directors or producers or whoever happens to be there in a social capacity, which in my experience actually breaks the ice a lot more than walking up to someone and saying, hey, I'm really awesome, hire me. I mean, you would never say it that bluntly, but even then, for me, it's always felt icky to solicit myself. You have to be a good self-promoter in this business, because even with agents, and even if you have a manager, you've got to wear all those hats. But I've found that through, and we might all be in very different places. We're not all necessarily, I don't want to say the same professional level. Some people might, I mean, look at Yuri and Tara. I mean, their body of work is staggering. I have a fraction of their credits, but that's really not the issue, you know. It's a great place to actually get to know them a little bit better, because, you know, like, we're all sort of here and the playing field is level and we're all enjoying each other's company. I love going to cons for that reason too, because there are people whose names I know, but I might not ever get to meet them. I might not ever get to work with them. But, you know, it's like going to camp with your friends for the weekend, you know, and usually, you know, I was at Anime Boston a little over a month ago, and there were 13 voice actor guests. And a lot of other, I mean, it was big. So you can't possibly get to know everyone that well, but, you know, you bond with the people you bond with, and it's great. And I have friends that I will count as friends for life because of some of those experiences, and that's totally invaluable, work or no work.
What did you think of playing the character Lauren, and have you ever watched Hellsing?
I have watched Hellsing. I watched it for research, and I watched it since. Like I said, it was very fortunate that I got to play her under the tutelage of such a gifted director who has become my friend, because in the hands of somebody else, it might be very different and almost certainly not as good. And again, I'm my own harshest critic. I sometimes will pick it apart and I'll be like, I can't believe you missed that. It's like, no. he was pretty thorough. If he wasn't getting what he wanted, he would work me till he got what he wanted. There were some things that we probably did 7 or 8 times. So, I mean, it was a little strange playing a Nazi, even though the fact that she was a Nazi is like not even the worst thing about her. But I mean, it's an interesting character. I mean, this is someone completely without any redeeming qualities whatsoever. I might have said this yesterday, I don't know, but you know, most villains have a backstory, some kind of history or some event in their lives that made them who they are, and it almost, you know, so you can maybe, it'll elicit some sympathy or understanding. No, she's just a rotten evil bitch. And most of the characters I play aren't like that, which is nice. But in a way, it was kind of freeing. You know, there was no moral compass to guide me, so it's just I could kind of go for broke with it, but not go over the top. They still wanted it pretty realistic sounding, so hopefully that worked. I mean, for as unrealistic as this world is, you know, but that people in the weirdest way can relate. I mean, she's a lot of people's favorite villain, which I guess is good.
Maybe a little bit different from people who are based on the comedian. You mentioned before about you know, being able to do auditions and work from home using home studio.
Mm-hmm.
Do you do work for other cities? Do you have representation to do other
I
cities,
have
say New York?
and I have an agent in San Francisco, and I have an agent in Chicago. I don't get a ton of auditions from them, but sometimes there'll be phases where I'll get like 10 in a week or something. But yeah, I mean, if someone wants to hire me, I don't really care where they are, unless I physically can't get there, in which case hopefully they'll have a patch. Obviously, it's easier being able to go to the studio. That's why I do recommend for anybody who's very serious about being a voice actor, especially if you want to do games or animation, Los Angeles is just kind of where it's at. There's not a ton of work elsewhere for that. You know, Chicago's great for advertising. There's stuff in New York, but most of it's in Los Angeles. So I do have the benefit of being there for most of that. But oh yeah, I've done work for all different cities, and actually they did hire a studio, but I did a spot for a product called Bio Oil, and they were directing me from South Africa via phone patch. Technology is amazing. They said, and that was an interesting case of direction. I've never been directed like this in my life. They said, Rachel, we really love your voice, but we want you to read it as flat and as dull as possible. I said, what do you mean? We want no emotion in your voice, no cadence, no music, just almost like you're dead, but not really dead. I said, and I'm thinking, I have no idea what and I'm looking at the engineer, he's like, so, and then I literally said, you know, Bio Oil helps the appearance of scars and stretch marks. They're like, no, it's too musical. So, who knows? But I think, yeah, you be prepared for anything. Because it's a really wide spectrum, but it's, to me, the greatest job in the world. And I think we're about wrapping up. Okie dokie. Thank you guys for being here. We appreciate it.